Hello and welcome to today's webinar on how communicators can get better results using AI. I'm Chip Griffin, CARMA's Chief Strategy Officer, and I'm looking forward to today's discussion on a topic that I am very passionate about, and I know from my conversation with PR and communications pros around the world is top of mind. We'll be focused on some practical ideas and some concepts that you can use to get more from the tools that you're already using and begin to explore perhaps some that you aren't. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. If you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A function, which I believe should be at the bottom of your screen. I'll do my presentation, then take Q&A at the end, but feel free to submit your questions at any time. And of course, there will be a replay of this made available to you as well. So with that, we've got a lot of ground to cover. Since it is a topic that I'm passionate about, I tend to go on at length, so I've got to try to pack as much in here in the time that we have available. So we'll do just that right now. So I want to start by setting the table. And we need to think about the way that most PR and communications professionals are currently using AI tools. And the most common way that people are using it is for drafting content, writing content, paraphrasing content, those kinds of things. And that's all good, and those are all useful things. There was a survey towards the end of last year from Axios where they found that 78% of communicators were using tools for those kinds of things, and only 14% were using AI in a more advanced way where they'd built proper systems and processes to rely upon. At the same time, more optimistically, 42% of communicators have built at least one advanced system, whether that's a custom GPT or an agent or a skill or a workflow or something like that. So it's not a foreign concept, and many of you have already probably started dabbling with some of it, but in all likelihood, not too many of you are using it on a day-to-day basis to the full potential that it has. And of course, it's also something that is continuing to evolve, and we're getting new skills and tools and abilities every day. And one of the most popular questions that I tend to get, or the topics that you see in the media, is that AI is out to take your job. And I always want to be very clear about this. I think AI is out to take your job if you don't embrace it, if you don't figure out how to take the value from it and build upon it to create more value for your employer, your clients, and yourself. And so AI doesn't have to be scary. AI should be something that you view with real optimism, because it is something that presents you with new opportunities. And we're going to go through some of those opportunities today. We'll also touch on some of the risks and some of the things that you need to pay attention to, because while I am an idealist to some extent with AI, I am also a realist about it. So there's no doubt that the number of tools that we have available only keeps multiplying. I've got here on the screen some of the most common ones that you've probably already become familiar with to one extent or another. ChatGPT has historically had a lot of market share, but amongst communicators in particular, Claude has been gaining market share over the course of this year, in large part because it's pretty good at long-form writing, and it's got some additional capabilities that ChatGPT is now getting caught up with, but they're in kind of an arms race, and that's helpful from the perspective of the consumer, because we're continuing to get more capabilities out of all of them, and that puts more power in our hands, which means that we can do more for all of our key stakeholders. There are any other number of tools. I've got, again, a few of them on the screen. And then there are specialty tools like CARMA's own NOR Personal AI Analyst. And by having those specialized tools like that, they can access specific data sets and have specific capabilities. In NOR's case, it's able to apply CARMA's measurement methodology to everything that it includes as outputs. And so that's a really helpful thing to have. And there are other specialist tools out there. There are design tools available for you that can help in that particular area. Claude has a very nice design tool layered within it as well. So there's all of these different tools and capabilities, and I want to encourage all of you to be experimenting with the tools, because it helps you to expand your horizons. But at the same time, I think it's important to come into this with a real mindset. And we need to not just think about the tools, we need to think about why we're using them. And the most common thing that you tend to hear about AI is, wow, it saved me so much time. I was able to get so much more done in a day because of it. And it is no doubt in many cases a time saver, whether that's taking a 30-page document and giving you a quick summary that you can read, or it's helping you to proofread content or ideate or those kinds of things. It absolutely saves you time. But I would encourage you not to think about this as a time-saving device. Think about it as a value creator. Think about AI in terms of what you can use it for to get better quality results for everybody that you're working with. It can help you make better decisions. It can help you do things that you might otherwise not have done, either because it took a lot of time or perhaps it was not something that's within your normal skill set. It can help you to learn things. And so therefore, even outside of AI, it can increase your capabilities for what you're doing as a communicator. And it also helps you to spot things that you might have missed. I use AI all the time to check myself. And whether that's on content or strategy or something else, AI is really good at poking holes if you let it. And by understanding those gaps, it can help you to improve your results and not just do it faster, but actually do it better. And so when you're assessing how AI is helping you, I think the real question you want to ask yourself is, what did this make possible for me that I might not otherwise have achieved? And that's when you start to understand that you've really accomplished something with the AI beyond saving a little bit of time here or there. So I wanted to share at a high level some of the key roles that AI might fill for you as a communicator. And this is not an exhaustive list. It's a good starting point. But when you start thinking about the jobs or roles that are available to you and not think so much about the tools themselves and the tasks, this is when you can sort of expand your horizons for the opportunities that exist for you. So some of the obvious ones, analyst, obviously, we're coming from a media intelligence company today, so analysis of large volumes of content is right in the wheelhouse of AI, and it can help you to find patterns that you might otherwise have missed, dig deeper than you might otherwise have been able to, and produce insights that would have been left on the table in the past. You can use it to take your ideas, though, and take your idea, whether that's a strategic idea or a tactical idea, and say, hey, does this add up? Does this work? Is this going to create any problems that I'm not thinking of? Are there ways that I could protect myself against the downside risk of some of these activities? And I use it for this all the time because I think that it's able to think about things in a way that I don't. Particularly when you're older like me and you've had a lot of experience, you tend to start discounting things because, well, I did that before and that didn't work. You can take your ideas, present it, and AI can challenge you and help you to look at things with a fresh perspective that you might not otherwise. It's a fantastic prep partner. I'll talk a little bit later about some of the ways in particular that I used AI in helping me to prepare for today's webinar. But whether you're talking about a meeting, a presentation, a proposal, all of those kinds of things, AI is really adept at helping to ask questions and probe and get you ready for the environments that you're going to be in so that you can be smarter and better prepared. It's a great reporting engine. You can throw a pile of data at it and it will produce excellent charts and graphs, and it makes decisions about the best ones to show at any particular moment in time. And that means that you can convey your messages and convey your assessments to people much more quickly and easily than you ever could before. For example, a few months back, I connected Google Analytics to Claude, and I just asked it to give me a rundown for traffic from the past month, and some of the insights it boggled my mind that it was able to figure some things out about the business and about the history of the business, things going back 10 or 15 years and its impact on traffic today. And it was not, I hadn't in that particular case fed any particular context or anything. It was just one-shotted. And if it can do it that well one-shotted, imagine what it can do with context. And we'll talk about the importance of context as we go on in today's webinar. Obviously, for communicators and marketers, it's a really helpful tool to use for repurposing. Start with an article, start with a video, what have you, and then AI can help you slice and dice it into a lot of different formats and give you ready-made drafts that you can just tweak and make sure that you perfect. But it saves a lot of time there. But more importantly, it gives you the ability to reach platforms that you might not otherwise have taken the time to do, which means that you can reach more of your key target audience. It's a great instructor or teacher. It's a great tool for saying, hey, I don't understand how this concept, or I don't know how to do this. Teach me, show me. I had an issue here on my computer network here at home in terms of how my laptop was talking to my network attached storage device. And so I had to try to figure out how I was going to solve that problem. And I Googled it a bit, and I slapped myself on the head. I'm like, I love AI. Let me ask Claude. And Claude was able to, in just seconds, find an obscure setting that I needed to change on my network in order to get the performance results that I needed in the communication between the laptop and the storage server. And so those are the kinds of things that can really be made possible. You can sit there and say, hey, I don't understand how to cook this dish, or I don't understand the concept of advertising on this platform. And it will walk you through all of those things and help to teach you and educate you. It doesn't just have to do it for you, it can actually make you more intelligent about all of those activities. And of course, we hear all of these stories about vibe coding and how you can build with AI. And I think that's something that a lot of us as communicators are going to want to look at, whether that's vibe coding an app that helps you to present your reports and results better, or to manage projects internally, or any number of things. There's a lot of capability that exists when you turn AI into a builder for you. So these are just some of the key roles that I think it's probably worth considering in your role as a communicator, and think about how you might apply some of these things to the work that you're doing. But in order to get the results, part of the key mindset here is that you need to be thinking about how you give AI the information that it needs in order to be successful. And we've heard all of the horror stories about AI hallucinating and AI giving you bad advice and those kinds of things. But more often than not, it's because someone just said, hey, write me an article about XYZ. And they didn't give any kind of context on what kind of writing looked good, what kind of length they were looking for, didn't give any research, and just, not giving any information. And so there are three key things that you need to provide to whatever AI tool you're using if you want to get good results. The first, and probably the most important, is context. And if you start thinking about AI as if it was a new hire, think about that new hire that you've just brought on board. You don't just say to them, hey, go write an article on this topic. You say to them, hey, I need you to write this article. It's for this particular publication. It needs to be roughly this long. It's going to be in this person's voice. Here's some research. Here are some examples of things that the client has done before, or that we've done ourselves before, that can help you to understand what we're really looking for. And so that kind of context is incredibly helpful. So you need to provide the research and direction to the tool. They need to understand who is your target audience that you're trying to reach, whether that's, if you're in-house, your ideal client profile, or if you're working with a client at an agency, what their end client's ideal profile is. Those are things that you need to tell it, because it can make guesses, but why guess if you already know what those answers are? Treat it like that new hire that needs a little bit of information. Tell them, give them the instructions about what you're looking for, the technical details, but also just, what are the stylistic approaches that you take? And one of the things that you can really do with AI is teach it to write the same way that you do, or the way your organization does, by giving it examples. You can say, here are some known good examples of op-eds or articles or blog posts or social posts that we like, that were effective for us, and that we want to mirror in the work that we're doing. If you give it that kind of context, instructions, and examples, you will get much better results from the AI. So that's a key part of the mindset that you need to have. And all of this continues to compound, to produce additional value the more that you are investing in it. And so starting with the bottom of this tier, if you're focused on making sure that you're using the tool and you're storing your memory. So whether that's using the same tool over and over again, or taking a more advanced approach where you're writing some of the memories to files and then sharing that with other AI tools, you want to make sure that it's learning from what you're already doing and learning from the choices that you've been making. And then as you start doing tasks more repetitively, you want to build skills so that you can have those repeatable results. And skills then become something that you can share within your organization, so that everybody, when they're producing a blog post or a social post or a report for a client, they're using the same approach and producing similar results, just as we always do on a human level and have done for many, many decades, right? We share SOPs with each other. We share examples with each other. And that's how we make sure that everybody on the team is replicating a similar work product. It's the same thing, in skills within AI allow you to do that. And then, of course, you take it to the next level and you start scheduling some of these things. So if you have to do a report every week, have your tool of choice produce those first drafts for you. So it can just drop it in your inbox or in Google Docs or whatever tool you use, and you can edit from there. So you don't have to do all of that preliminary work. I mean, think about whatever organization you're with. We no doubt have a lot of things that we do on a weekly or monthly basis. And if we could get that started for us, if we could get the key bits filled in so that we can provide our real expertise and analysis on top of it, that's where we start to see the real improvements and we get better results in less time. And so that's a giant win in terms of how we can use AI beyond simply drafting some initial content or cleaning up the content that we draft for it. And so if we've now thought through the mindset that we need to have, now I want you to think about 4 specific habits that I think will improve the results that you're seeing from your AI tools. And the first one is that you need to manage without micromanaging. And again, this goes back to how you would work with an individual human employee. If you give too much instruction, that tends to bog them down. If you're sitting there and looking over their shoulder all the time and saying, no, do this, add a comma here, do these things, change that color right now, that it doesn't allow them to grow. It doesn't allow them to learn. We want our AI tools to grow and learn along with us. And so we need to give them the background information that they need, the context that we've talked about. We need to give them some guardrails so that we keep them in the general lane that we're looking at. But it's really more about teaching them what our goal is and helping them to understand what good looks like, rather than putting together a list of 700 rules. And this is something that's changed and evolved a bit over the last couple of years. A few years ago, you had to be super detailed in what you told the AI tools to get a good result. You needed to say, act like a social media strategist and do these 17 different steps and all of that. You don't need to do that anymore. And not only do you not need to do it, it actually can be harmful. And a number of the AI companies have come out and said, look, if you provide too many instructions to Claude, for example, you're actually going to impair the results because it starts to confuse them. It starts to bound them, and they start kind of running around in circles. Again, not all that different from what might happen with a human employee. If you give them too much, you overwhelm them. And so you need to point them in the direction, but then trust that they go there and trust that they can help you to achieve the results that you're looking for. Of course, none of this works if you're not then following up. And so one of the things that I see a lot of folks doing with AI is they get the draft out of the tool, they maybe refine it a little bit, and then they take it away and they go edit it somewhere else, or they change the strategy after they have a meeting based on what they got from Claude or ChatGPT. And it's really important that you go back to the tool that you were working with and let them know what the outcomes were. Let them know what the final product looked like. You can take that article that you wrote and whatever was finally published, give it back to Claude and say, hey, here's what we ended up with. And then Claude will say, okay, I got it. I see all these things that you did differently. I'll learn from this in the future. If you take a strategy document and then you have your meeting with your team or with your client and you make a decision, go back to Claude. Share what you decided and why, because that will then help inform future decisions. You really, again, all of this comes back to thinking about AI like it's a human. And I know that's a tough hill to climb for many of you. It's honestly a challenge that I've had. The whole concept of anthropomorphizing an AI tool is just, it's difficult. I get it. But the more that you do that and the more that you treat it that way and you say, what would I do with an account executive, or what would I do with a communications manager on my team? You want to do the same thing with your AI tool, because that's how you will continue to improve the results and get more. But you also need to not just provide the feedback, but when you get stuck or when you get something that you don't like or you see an error made by the tool, ask, why did this happen? And I've had this happen any number of times. I give an example sometimes of the M-dash. And as a professional writer for many years, I love the M-dash. I've used it for decades and would love to continue using it. But when I'm working with AI, it tends to overuse the M dash. And so I had in the instructions that I had a rule that said you can't use an M dash more than twice in an article that you're helping me to draft. And it never really seemed to work. And so finally, I just threw my arms up. And one day I said to Claude, I said, Claude, why are you doing this? I've got a very clear rule. And Claude said, look, I don't really function that way because of the way that I create the text. I don't actually go back and look. So I would have to go back and re-edit the whole document to pare it down. And I can do that if you'd like. But basically, I work better if you just give me a binary yes or no. And so I changed my rule to no M dashes, and then I can add them back if I want myself. And I've also, over time, modified the rules so that if I give a draft and it's already got an M dash, I've told Claude, don't take it out, leave it in there, because I made the conscious decision to use it for the emphasis that it provides. And I'll put up with, people heckling me and saying, oh my God, AI must have written this for you because it has an M dash, which we're not going to go into that today, but it is silly because plenty of people have used and will continue to use M dashes despite the fact that people think it's an AI tell. But ask these questions. If you see something that doesn't make sense, ask. And you'd be surprised at how frank the tools will be with you and how candid they will be in sharing the information that you need in order to improve. And that might be, sometimes it will suggest putting in an additional guardrail. Sometimes it will tell you that it did it because you didn't give it enough context. And so by exploring this, again, just like you would with an employee, if they make a mistake, say, hey, how did this happen? How can we prevent this in the future? Same thing that you want to do with ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or whatever you're working with on that given day. So now we have to think about, we've thought about how we're starting to get results, but now we want to get consistent results. We want to make sure that we're getting the same things over and over again. And so that is not just giving it the initial context, but it's saving the context. So in some cases, at the easiest level, that means using the same account over and over again. You don't have to use the same chat in most cases with whatever tool you're using anymore. That was the case, maybe a year or two ago. Now, as long as you're within the same account, it will generally have the context and memories built up for the decisions that you've made and the information that you've shared. But then there are more advanced ways that you can do this as well. And I'll touch on this a little bit later, but it's really a little bit more of an advanced topic, but you can actually have it so that the results of your chats with a tool get saved to individual files on your computer and so then become accessible so that, for example, in my case, I will share context across Claude and ChatGPT and Gemini so that I can get similar results just using the different models and engines that they have available, but they still have the same information about the work that I've been doing. So they start at a more advanced place. But make sure that you're using it for this purpose. Make sure that you are, when you find yourself doing something repeatedly, come up with a standard operating procedure that the tool can use, whether that's a formal skill in a tool like Claude or just a process file or a process that you've agreed upon with the tool. And you can often say to it, hey, I feel like I'm doing this over and over again. What's the best way to make sure we can get repeatable results? And one of the best things you can do with AI is to ask it to help you improve itself. And so I frequently will say to Claude or ChatGPT, how can I get better results? Or one of the things I actually have is I have an ongoing task that every week goes back and looks at everything that I've done over the past week, and it automatically will make recommendations to me for new skills that I might want to have, or additional context that I could give it to improve things, or additional tools I might want to be considering. So don't be afraid to ask those questions and have it help you to build the processes, and it will ask you questions so that it'll say, well, do you want to go this way or this way for the particular solution? And you can help guide it, again, just like a real employee. And then, of course, we've already referred to this earlier, but ultimately you want to get to a point where things that you know happen on a routine schedule, you can have the tool schedule so that it's doing it for you and you don't have to go in and manually tell it, hey, let's produce a result today, because it knows every Friday you're producing a competitive intelligence report. Every Wednesday you're producing a measurement report. Whatever it might be, let the tool help you to get there more effectively, more efficiently, and more consistently. I do want to take a moment to talk about this fourth habit, because I think that I've heard a lot of people say that AI is great, it's really helpful, it can do all of these things, but it's not a strategist. And so the role for communicators is to be the strategist and then have the AI tools help you on implementation. But the cold, hard reality is that AI is actually a pretty decent strategist already. Is it perfect? No. Is it as creative as we might be? No, because it relies on probabilities, right? AI tools are essentially probability engines, and so they will tend to migrate towards the mean. They will give you the average strategy that someone might implement given a particular scenario. But you know what? There's a reason why that's the average choice. It's generally pretty safe. It doesn't necessarily have the same upside potential, but it's also probably less risky than some of the other avenues you might take. So don't discount the ability of AI to strategize. What you really want to do is say, hey, look, I'm not going to rely on AI for the strategy, and I'm not going to say that I can't use it for the strategy, but how about we bring it together? And particularly for those of us who maybe work with smaller teams, or those of us who like to work at odd hours on weekends and don't want to call up a colleague and say, hey, I want to brainstorm this. You can use your AI tools as excellent thought partners. You can sit there and talk through different ideas and say, hey, well, what about this or what about that? And particularly if you start doing that more often with your tool of choice, you can coach it into a place where it gives you the right level of pushback. And we all have different styles and personalities, right? Some of us need to have that pat on the back first and then a little bit of a nudge in the right direction. Some of us just need to be socked in the face and told exactly where we're wrong. And you can modulate that by providing your feedback. You can give it some high-level instructions on how you like to work and what kind of feedback works best for you. But definitely do that, because if you use the tool to really kind of bounce ideas around with, it can help you to figure out, how you're going to refine this idea for the best that it can be. How can it ask you questions so that maybe you consider a different angle that you might not otherwise have done? And ultimately, it gets you to that better decision, because you're not missing out on context or ideas or things that you should be paying attention to. And so you'll get those better results by acting with your AI as a thought partner and really treat them not necessarily as an equal. You're still the decider, but you need to have them feel free to give you that kind of honest feedback. Ultimately, though, you are still in the driver's seat. You are still in charge. Judgment still matters. So don't worry. I'm not telling you that the AI should be totally autonomous. And I know that there are a lot of folks out there. You'll see videos or articles about people who've created these agents, and it's a team of agents, and they do all of the work all by themselves. Well, that's not necessarily the right solution for most of you. And you wouldn't do that with your own team members. And you wouldn't just say, hey, I've got a team of 10 people. I'm just going to let them go off and do their own thing, and I'm going to go sit back and sip a Mai Tai and check back in a month. That's not how it works. You do need to continue to be involved and layer your judgment in to the work that you're doing with AI. And so you need to do the basics. And I've got on the screen here some of those basics that you should be thinking about. You need to be making sure that the tool isn't hallucinating. Even though it's gotten better, all of the tools will still hallucinate from time to time. And there's a variety of reasons why they do it. Part of it can be because you've given them too rigid an instruction. Part of it can be that you haven't given them enough context. A huge problem for these tools is they want to please you. They want you to be happy. And so you have to coach it to say, hey, look, if you can't figure it out, please just say so. Don't just try to fill in the blank or make your best guess or just read the first sentence of something and determine that tells you everything that you need to know. Make sure that you are digging in and verifying. And this is particularly true when you start to share facts or data. And so one of the things that I do whenever I'm using AI for a research tool is I will have it double check itself on specific facts, and I will ask it to give me specific citations so that I can go back and either spot check if there's a large volume or individually check if it's a small volume, and just confirm that I would interpret the data the same way. And just like you would with a team member, you've got to figure out when you've gotten to that point that you can generally trust what you're getting from the tool. So I would never tell you to just blindly accept on faith what you're getting from AI, but work with it and you'll figure out, where that threshold needs to be so that you're not redoing all of its work, but you're doing enough to verify it. And obviously the higher the stakes, the data or the decision that's being made, the more scrutiny you have to provide in order to verify correctly. You need to make sure that you're not just accepting the generic AI voice that comes out, because we all know what that looks like. And we all know what it looks like from a design perspective. You can look at certain websites and be like, well, that was one-shotted from Claude, and that's all that was. They just gave a paragraph of instruction, got the website, moved on. They just gave the instruction, we've got this AI slop showing up on LinkedIn. That's not what you want to do. You need to train it on how you and your organization communicate. What are the word choices that you make? What are the style choices that you make? Do you say things more directly and forcefully? Do you tend to have more nuance? Do you tend to rely more on facts or more on opinion? All of those things go into the mix. And so I've personally spent a lot of time with my AI tools helping it to understand my personal voice so that no matter what I'm writing, it will always look at it either from a first draft or an editing perspective through that lens of what my typical writing looks like. And the more that you can give it that advice, the more you make sure that your judgment is going to show up in what you do. But ultimately, that also means you review everything that comes out of it. You don't have it automatically publish blog posts or social posts or comments or any of that kind of stuff. That's where you end up with slop. That's where you end up with embarrassment. You need to be making sure that it echoes your voice accurately. You need to understand in all of these situations, what's the worst thing that can happen? And that helps you to understand how much of your judgment has to go into it. If it's simply providing a news summary that you're using for yourself, okay, you probably don't need to spend that much on it unless you are looking at something and saying, aha, this is something I'm going to make an investment decision off of. This is something I'm going to make a recommendation to a client off of. But for example, I have a daily summary that I get from Claude that will go through and look at all of the email newsletters that I receive and give me a summary. The worst case scenario is that I get some bad information and then I maybe perhaps repeat it, but obviously that's unlikely to happen because usually I'll click on the link and read more about that particular topic if it's that important that I'm probably going to be referring to it. But it gives you so much more power if you understand what's your risk profile for those different activities, and you can figure out how much to invest in it. You also want to be careful, though, that you're not just jumping into this, completely into the deep end of the pool. If all you've ever used AI for up until this point is a little bit of light writing and editing and those kinds of things, don't go out and try to set up OpenClaw or something like that. That's not the right solution. You want to, just as you would with any other tool or technique, you want to gradually increase your knowledge level, your comfort level, and move with it as you go. You always want to make sure that you're protecting your data. And for those of you who are using personal AI accounts, the first thing I would tell you is, for work purposes, please do not use free accounts if you can avoid it. Free accounts are automatically used for training of all the models, and so you have basically very little protection on them. Instead, make sure that you're using some level of a paid account, and if you use the paid account, make sure you go into privacy settings and turn off the automated training function, because by default, almost all of the tools, even at the paid level, will have training turned on. So all of the data you put in goes to their servers to be trained upon for future models. And you can easily turn that off, which it doesn't guarantee protection, but it certainly helps quite a bit. At the same time, you also need to think about all of the data that you're putting in, and again, go back to that worst case scenario. What's the worst thing that would happen if this data leaked out? If you have a contractual issue, either with your employer or with a client, that's a big deal, and you've got to make sure that you're abiding by those restrictions. If it's not prohibited by any kind of a legal agreement or regulatory agreement, then you have to ask yourself, would this information getting out become a real problem for me, for my employer, for my organization, what have you? And so think about that and be reasonable in your protections of the data, but don't go overboard, because otherwise you're not able to give enough context to the tools to get the best possible results. And then the last thing I would say, and this probably skews more for my friends in the agency world, it's important that you disclose AI as necessary, particularly, again, as contractually or regulatorily required, but don't overdo it. I see a lot of folks who feel the need to give excruciating detail about how they use AI for different things. The reality is everybody is or should be using AI today. It will only increase. And so you have to be, I think, reasonable in how you disclose AI. Obviously, there are a lot of new rules and regulations coming into place, particularly in Europe and elsewhere, about what has to be disclosed. You need to abide by that, but at the same time, don't twist yourself in knots. Don't give so many disclosures that it just becomes befuddling to whoever you're communicating with. Make sure that you're using good judgment there in how you're applying your own judgment. So as we're talking about disclosure of AI, I think it's important to think about some of the findings of some recent research that CARMA did in our latest Perceptions of AI report, where we look at both media coverage and public opinion surrounding AI. And I think this helps to inform how much we want to voluntarily disclose and how much we want to say this is AI powered or this is an AI something or other. And the reality is that our research has found, and I don't think this will surprise any of you, that the more that you tout something as being a product of AI or fueled by AI, the less that people pay attention to it, because people are trying to throw AI on absolutely everything. It's sort of like back, for those of you who are old enough like me to remember the early days of the .com era, when everything was E this or I this, because we wanted to make everybody understand that we were cool, we were hip, we were technology, and we wanted you all to have that right in your face. And AI has become the same thing. Domain names that end in .ai just to give it a little bit of additional appeal. That's actually had the opposite effect, and so people are starting to tune out those AI claims. And so we want to be using it, but it should be integrated with the day-to-day work that we're doing and not necessarily something that we just trumpet for the sake of it being AI. At the same time, people's trust in AI is actually increasing. And so the Perceptions of AI Report 1 earlier this year, and then the more recent one that just came out a few weeks ago, that trust level has gone from 26% to 30%. Still a minority. There's still a lot of lack of trust in AI. There's a lot of skepticism. Doesn't take any genius to figure that out. You pick up any kind of a newspaper or look at a website, and you will see that there are plenty of questions and concerns about AI. But I think we're headed in that direction where a lot of people are understanding that this is where things are headed. And again, a lot of this is not all that different from the mid-1990s when the World Wide Web was coming into existence, and it kind of made people nervous. And now today it's part of what we do. And it will be the same way with AI in a few years' time, where it just becomes so ingrained in what we do that we sort of wonder, why did we even talk about it in separate terms? It's just part of the overall evolution of the technology space that we live in. I did want to take just a moment here to share some practical examples of some things that I know that communicators that I've worked with are actually doing, again, fueling some of the thinking that some of you may have. I know one agency professional who uses an AI tool to do AP style checks against all of the content that their team is producing. And so that allows for a much more careful analysis. And it's something that you can kind of sort of do with some of the existing grammar checkers and those kinds of things. But AP style is obviously very specific, and some organizations like to adhere very carefully to whether it's AP style or some other thing. You can build tools that will help you get there. It could simply be a style guide for your own organization. It could be that you have certain terms that are off limits or certain ways you always want to say something. You can build a skill and then share it with your team so that it's going through all of the content that you do, and it makes sure that you're always consistent in the facts and figures, in the way that you capitalize certain terms, for example, in the way that you refer to certain products or services, so that you have that consistency. And one of the things that we all, well, maybe not all, but that is clear from an LLM visibility standpoint is the more consistent you are in some of the terminology. So if you use the same phrases over and over again, use the same facts and figures over and over again in the exact same way, it will have an impact on your LLM visibility. So you can have skills and tools that help you to meet, whether it's an external style guide or an internal style guide, that will get you more of the results that you want. Another agency leader uses an AI tool to create creative briefs that the tool then uses to actually do the creative work. And so let me explain. Basically, what you can do is you can have a conversation, say, with ChatGPT and say, in fact, this is a real conversation that I've had. I've had a conversation about the kinds of images that I like to have accompany some of my blog posts. And so we talk through some of the style choices and what matters there. And so then I'll describe to it what the article is that I'm writing, and it will then put together a brief for itself effectively that says, here's the style, here are the colors, here's the size, here's the theme that we're looking for, and because of this theme, here's the concept we'd like to have. And then you can feed it back into that same tool, and it will follow that just as if you had developed that brief all on your own. But you can work collaboratively with the tool to come up with the brief for whatever creative work that you're doing, and you'll get better results than if you just say, hey, give me an image for this article, and here's the topic. Have it work collectively with it to create that brief, because if it can tell itself what to do, it knows what are the most important facts and guardrails to give itself in order to get those great results. I heard from a sole practitioner who works in a field where RFPs are sort of the norm in order to win business. And so this particular individual built some skills around responding to RFPs by feeding it previous successful RFPs that they had submitted, learning from it, and figuring out how then to take an incoming request for a proposal and turn around a draft response that's based on what they know has worked previously. And so that has shaved a tremendous amount of preparation time off, but also has resulted in the last 2 RFPs that were submitted this way being won. And for those of you who play in the RFP arena as an agency or a solo, you understand how challenging RFPs can be to win. And so that's really proof positive in this case that the AI systems they put in place were effective. And then the last example I wanted to share is someone I know who basically runs their entire agency by having ongoing conversations with their tool of choice. And so that allows them to effectively have, you can call it a co-CEO or a chief of staff or a consigliere or a little birdie on their shoulder, whatever you want to think of it as. It's someone that they can have ongoing conversations with and approach the different challenges and issues that they have throughout the week. And so for a lot of people, that can be comforting to have the ability to just share some things and get some general feedback. Obviously, we all want to be careful that we don't go too far with the tools. And you hear some of the horror stories about, people who treated the AI so much like a human being that they sort of lost sight of reality. But I think that's a relatively small risk for most of us. And so I would encourage all of you to be more interactive with your tools and to share more, because it really can help to surface things. And sometimes it just helps you to talk things through. And the AI is always there. It's on at whatever hour of day you want. It's there no matter whether it's tired or not, because it doesn't get tired. So it's unlike our coworkers, our employees, our family, who may be just like, okay, Chip, I've had enough. I don't need to hear any more about this. AI will never tell you that, and so it can be a very useful tool from that perspective. I thought, as far as practical examples, it would be helpful to give just a quick overview of how I used AI to build this outline this webinar today. Started by throwing a bunch of context at Claude and saying, okay, here are some previous talks I've given on the subject. Here are some notes that I've had. Here are some transcripts from some podcasts that I've done on the topic. Let's put together an outline. And so we went back and forth and we built an outline. And it really was a back and forth where Claude suggested some things. I said, no, that's not, I don't want to do that here. And so we kind of reached an agreement on what the overall structure would be. Then Claude went through and looked at more than 15,000 pieces of context that I've fed it in terms of notes from Evernote, transcripts from previous webinars and podcast episodes and articles I've written and all of that going back decades. And so it has all of this, and it can mine all of that and say, okay, well, your advice on this was this, so let's kind of make sure we weave it in. And so that then started building some of the content out before we moved on. And then I asked Claude to do some original research, and that's where some of the data that I shared earlier came in, where it uncovered some facts and figures that would be useful to the talk and that would fit along with the subject matter that we were looking at. But then I had it verify those, and I subsequently re-verified them myself to make sure that I was sharing good data with all of you. And then, of course, we finally get to the design stage. And at that point, I take all of the outline and all of that, and I give it a style guide that we use at CARMA, and we came up with this deck. And again, that was an interactive, iterative process. And I said, no, I don't like this. And so what this looks like looks very different than the very first version that I got. And so you just kind of keep refining until you get there. And I made sure that every step as I made my own edits to the PowerPoint, I sent it back to Claude so that it could both check it and make sure I hadn't done anything stupid, because sometimes I make typos. I know, shocking. But it was able to help me come up with a better product. And I'm convinced that what I'm presenting to you today is both substantively better, designed better, all of those things because of the partnership that I had. All you would need to do is look at some of the previous webinars that I've given that don't look nearly this good and aren't nearly this well prepared. Still good value, I think, personally, but I'm biased. But this is a better result, and that's the ultimate goal, as I mentioned earlier, that we want to have from AI. And I can see we've got a bunch of questions, so I do want to try to wrap up quickly here. I just want to tease you a little bit with where you can take all of this, and I've alluded to it a few times here, but I have built my own personal AI operating system. Some people refer to it as a second brain, but it's literally a set of files that has all sorts of information about my previous work and personal experience, my thoughts, my ideas. As I mentioned before, more than 15,000 pieces of content that I've created personally over the years have been fed in there. But then I've also taken advantage of the fact that Claude is actually a pretty good interviewer. And if you haven't figured out already, Claude is generally my tool of choice, but I also use pretty much all of the other platforms. ChatGPT would be a close second in terms of ones that I use. But they're really good at interviewing you. So I have had Claude spend several days just interviewing me to explore gaps in the knowledge that it has based on what I gave it, to help walk through various steps of my career and to understand some of the decisions that I've made. And I periodically will say to Claude, hey, interview me on this subject that I want to be writing more about or talking more about, so that it can start to learn maybe things that I haven't already put down in some digital format that it can learn from. But I've also got it so that it will take all of the chats that I do on a weekly basis, analyze them, save key memories, save key decisions, so that that's all tracked. It knows what's coming up on my schedule because of work that we've done together, and it will prod me and say, hey, this is probably your top priority today because this is coming up. For example, yesterday it said, you've got this webinar tomorrow, let's make sure we've got this finalized. And so that's helpful. It seeks to figure out how to improve itself. As I mentioned before, on a weekly basis, it goes through and says, hey, you do these things over and over again, we should create a skill to do this. Or I keep seeing this error or this workaround that I've had to do, maybe we should find a better solution. And that's really helpful. In some cases, when it sees the same error and over again, it just can self-fix it because I've given it the freedom to make certain decisions on its own. It's pretty limited, and it has to be low risk, but those are the kinds of things that you can do when you go deeper down this rabbit hole and start doing more with AI. So I'm not going to belabor this anymore. If this is something that you'd be interested in learning more about, let me know. I'd be happy to probably do another more in-depth webinar on building an AI operating system that you and your team can use. But I did want to just sort of, even though we were focused more at the higher level initial steps to take, I did want you to know where you can take this when you really get deeper into it. And ultimately, the flip side of that scarier message I gave you at the start of this webinar, where I said, hey, AI is coming for your job. The good news is you can do a better job if you embrace AI. You can produce better results for your employer, for your organization, for your clients, and for yourself if you embrace AI. So if you take nothing else away from this today, take away that AI is here to help you. AI is something that you can use to help you in order to achieve whatever it is that you're trying to do in your career or even in your personal life. And if you take advantage of it, if you give it the context, if you follow the habits that I've given you today, it should get you off on a very solid start to going to that next level with whatever AI you're working with. So some concrete things that I would suggest maybe you do out of today's webinar. If you haven't done so already, work to put together a proper brief using AI. Go back and forth with it, whether that's a design brief or a content brief or a strategy brief, but spend some time doing that back and forth work so you can kind of see how it works and provide the ongoing feedback to it. That will be a useful process. At some point in the next week, take something that you do all the time, whether that's editing things or whether that's producing reports, and work with your tool of choice to create a skill so that you can make that a consistent, repeatable process. And then finally, take something that you just, geez, I never thought I could do this because it's too hard, it's too difficult, it's too much work, I don't know enough about it. Just pick one thing. And maybe don't complete that one thing, but at least start down that path. Take something that's just been on your mind, some idea you've had in the back of your head or something you say, I wish I could ever figure out how to do this. Start trying it. Start seeing what's possible with AI, because that will open the doors for you to great possibilities that I think you will be able to see real meaningful results sooner rather than later. So with that, we will jump over to questions now, because again, I do see that we have quite a few in here. I will try to get to as many as I can. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to have additional conversations with all of you about any topics that I don't get to during the course of today's webinar, because this is an area that I really am passionate about, and I know there are lots of questions that you all have, maybe haven't even asked in the Q&A function here. So with that, let me take this off the screen so we can make this a little bit more of an interactive environment. And I will start with this one. How do you join apps like Claude and Google Analytics? So in Claude or ChatGPT or those tools, you have what are typically called connectors. And so the connectors allow you to link up with different data sources. I don't want to get super technical in today's talk, but they're often referred to as MCPs, Model Context Protocols. For those of you who have heard the term API in the past, they're very similar to APIs. And it's a great way for Claude or ChatGPT to access information from somewhere else. There are a lot of providers that will give you direct access to the tools, but some require a third party. In the case of Google Analytics, the easiest way to do it is through a third party that's called Windsor. And so you basically connect Windsor to Google Analytics, and then it translates it into Claude. I suspect that will probably evolve at some point, but that's the easiest translation layer for Google Analytics in particular. But my suggestion on all of these things is if you're sitting there in Claude or ChatGPT and saying, hey, I wonder how I could have you analyze Google Analytics, just ask. So these questions are really great ones for the tools themselves, where you can say, hey, I want to do this. What's the best way to do it? And we'll often give you step-by-step instructions. Sometimes it will even just pop up an approve box and make the connection for you. So you just want to try to work with the tools and give it the challenge that you want, and keep pushing until you get the solution that you're looking for, because almost anything is possible. Even some of the tools and services that don't have an integrated API or something like that, or an MCP today, you can access as long as you can log into them on the web. Claude, for example, has the ability to act as you in a browser session and access content. You can put Claude into PowerPoint and make edits directly within PowerPoint. There are so many different things that you can do, and it's constantly evolving and changing, and new stuff is coming every week. The best way to do it is just to ask your tool, hey, this is what I want to do. How can I do it? Let's see. How do I make sure the AI is remembering what I taught it between sessions? Just log in. So yes, and I did touch on this a little bit, I think, so I don't know, this may have come in before I talked in more detail about it. But in general, if you're using the same account, it will start to build memories. But one of the things, again, that I would encourage you to do is with whichever tool you're using, say, hey, what's the best way to make sure that you remember this information or these decisions? And it will often give you a few different ways that you might do it. In some cases, it might suggest converting a conversation into a skill where it stores a bunch of the information. So that was originally how I created what I call my chip voice skill, to make sure that it mirrors my writing style. And so I had a conversation with Claude about my writing style and what I was looking for. And we did some editing of some actual articles. And so then it took all of that information and then turned it into a skill so that it could review future writing and put it into the same voice and with the same cadence that I used, and the same paragraph length and some of the word choice and those sorts of things. So that's the first step. The second step is, as I said, to start storing that information in files. And then what you can do, if you're working within any of the tools, you can attach either a file or a folder of information, and that then gives it additional context and memory that it can access. And so, for example, in those cases, what you might do is at the end of a substantive chat that you've had, you might simply say, hey, can you write this to a file that I can save in my folder for you to look at in the future? And that's just another good way to have that memory expanded and give it the additional context and guidance that it needs to help get you better results in the future. Let's see, where can I keep rules to apply across multiple projects? So there's a couple of different things that you can do in order to have rules or instructions or memory span different projects or activities. So in most of the tools now, there are things that are called projects or folders or something similar. It varies based on the individual platform, but you can set up instructions usually for each one of those. So that then applies. Let's say that, for example, I might have a CARMA project, I might have a personal fitness project, I might have a photography project, and so I can have different sets of context and instructions for those, or you can set them up at the account level if you've got an individual account, and so you can put instructions and folders in at the account level so that it's got all of that accessed throughout all of the chats that you do. And then if your organization has a team or enterprise style account, typically you can have skills and instructions and context that are shared across teams. And that obviously then allows you to build greater consistency across all of them. So the specific mechanics will vary a little bit depending on the platform that you're using. And even within each platform, there are different flavors of it, right? There's, for example, with Claude, you've got chat, Cowork, and code, and they're all sort of the same, but they all have some important differences. And as you go across the different ones, you have some capabilities added and some taken away. And so it is a little bit of a balancing act. In general, the platforms have been working to more centralize the systems and make them a bit more similar to each other, so that you don't have any real inconsistencies across them. But it's going to be a while, I think, before we get to the place where they're all completely unified. But that is certainly the direction that we're heading, so it becomes more convenient, less confusing, and you can simply access certain things, but through the same interface. And so we're certainly headed there. Unfortunately, with that, we are now here just about at the bottom of the hour. So if you have additional questions that I didn't get to, and I know there are some that I didn't get to here, I'll try to get back to any of you that I can reach out to. Happy to do that, but happy to connect on LinkedIn as well and answer any questions that you may have through there. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit with me today about a topic that I'm really passionate about, that I think has a lot of promise for the PR and communications industry. I think it really allows us to communicate more effectively, to analyze and report more effectively. And I would encourage all of you to do more experimentation with AI, find more ways to integrate it into the work that you're doing. Focus not on just using it as a time-saving device, but instead look at it as something that helps you to create additional value, that helps you to create more results for yourself, for your employer, for your key stakeholders. And with that, we will draw this webinar to a close. Thank you again for joining us. If you want more information about any of CARMA's products and services, just visit CARMA.com. And I look forward to seeing you all on another webinar very soon. Thanks for joining me.